last phone that I'm going to use after this and create song.
Okay, bye. Yeah. Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it.
We're live.
There you go.
Hold on, let me share real quick.
Oh yeah, let me.
Hey y'all, we just getting set up. If you're out there, I'm about to turn on the chat. I'm messing up. I didn't have the chat up so I can see what y'all talk about. Yeah. We're waiting for Drew to join, but in the meantime and in between time, we're gonna go ahead and answer you guys' questions, comments. Let us know how you doing out there. I'm still waiting for this chat. It's taking its time to come up to see what the comments are. It's live with the KHive, live.
What's good, y'all? What's good? How y'all doing? How y'all feeling? Get your drinks, get ready. We about to spill some tea. We about to get into the topic, y'all.
I saw somebody had that. Hey, is it Jana? Hey, Jana. We got almost everybody online. Just waiting for a couple more people to say hello. What y'all drinking on tonight? Dandridge. Oh, Drew, shots fired. What? Dandridge said typical North Carolina A&T late.
You know what's funny? I'm actually rocking my Blue Death shirt right now. So this is for North Carolina A&T defense. Blue
okay.
Death football.
That's
you
nice
can't buy this in the bookstore. You had to earn that. Blood, sweat, tears, tackle. You understand what I'm saying?
Hey, Shayna, Carol, Tom. All right. Dandridge is not convinced. Dandridge, where'd you go to school at? It sounds like you got a rivalry going on. That's why you on Drew's case.
I went to Wake Tech. Listen.
Wake Tech, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, that's in North Carolina, too.
Oh, okay. Aussie for Kamala Harris says this is such a fun group. Hey, Biden Harris 2020. Yes, I think we all agree with that on live with the KHive.
Absolutely.
For y'all information, I had to touch
Morgan State. Dandridge is Morgan.
Wow. Yo, I got hurt on their field, yo. I was playing my because their stuff is like it's artificial turf or whatever, and I came down wrong and jamming that thing hurt.
Dang.
AstroTurf.
Hey, Dre, everybody say congratulations to Princess of Power. She brought her first home today, so she's sipping on some champagne. Cheers, hey. Princess of Power. Yes. Go ahead. Okay. Emma says, what was done to bring Sean King to the world on board, and what can be done to get the other?
Well, let me tell you something. No, I can't say nothing. We'll say that. Stay tuned to the after show, and then we'll talk.
Okay, we're gonna do that on the after show. We're gonna do the after show. So we're gonna film our show. Today's topics, Drew's gonna get into them. Yep. And then we're gonna go live again, but the live is not live with the KHive. The live is live with the people who are on live with KHive, not representing the KHive, just our own opinions. Okay, let's be clear. Let's make that distinction. All right, so we're gonna get started. But just let me go on ahead and say hey to Per Lichman, or is it Lickman? I'm so bad at pronouncing stuff. Y'all be telling people phonetically, tap it out for me. Shade Queen, Carol got her martini. So hey y'all, hey everybody who's watching on, we have Facebook, we have YouTube, and we have Twitter, Periscope. So thank y'all all for tuning in. Dana, hey Megan Lynch is on.
Hey, Megan, hey yo, what are we?
Cheers,
Megan.
Cheers to Megan.
Megan. Yes, Queen.
Good.
We love you, Megan.
Lynch. Let's go. Team Kamala in the building.
Right. She says hi. Okay. Howard. Hey, Ruben, Youssef, Baby Ethernet, not the KHive actually. Okay. Megan says, love y'all. Happy Friday. Yes, TGIF. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Drew. Drew, you go ahead and do the introductions. We're going to get started. We're live with KHive. And I'm going to be responding in the comments. when I'm not talking, of course. And we're gonna do the show like how we normally would. But please continue to talk amongst yourselves. Please continue to leave your comments, and then we're gonna respond in the comments, not necessarily verbally. And then after the show, we'll do the after the show. How about that? And Helena, hey Helena, and Aaron. Okay.
How my sound?
Bruce
How
here.
we sound since we live?
You sounded good. You sounded good.
It's all right. It's all right. So we ready to get this show on the mother freaking road. Let's.
You ready, Drew? You leading us off.
You already know. And in the baby voice, let's go. Yo. So what's up, y'all? It's another episode of Live with the KHive, talking all things Kamala, all things awesome, and you know how we gets down when we gets down. I'm your host, Drew Comments. We hosting today. I'm gonna go around the room. For those of you who have not yet made our acquaintance, let's get reacquainted once again. Or as Jay-Z said, allow us to reintroduce ourselves. Yo, Kenny, what's poppin'?
What's good, y'all? Y'all already know what it is. It's Kenny, formerly King of Clapbacks. Now Fix It Jesus. Don't tell nobody. But how y'all doing out there? I just have a good ass show. Let's get into it.
Word up, word up. Sid, what it do?
What's going on, everybody? It's your girl Sydney A back here again, once again, and y'all know. And I just wanted to say that tonight's antics are sponsored by DeLeon Tequila. Okay, y'all see that? You know, I'm a liquor influencer, so you know I gotta put up so y'all see that. All right, and we finna turn up. So,
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Yo, Heather, kissed by a rose on the grave. What's going on with you?
Hey now, what's up, y'all? It's Heather Rose from Howard University. You already know I gotta shout them out because we over here talking about other schools. You know how
the real HU.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I am returning to my favorite Kentucky lemonade right here. Got some whiskey in there. And yeah, Heather Rose Go on all the social media. Let's do this.
Word up. Maya Contreras, how you doing?
I'm doing good, and thank goodness I am not drinking the tequila like Sydney, or I'd already be dancing on my table right now. So I'm sticking with some wine. I'm gonna kind of keep it chill. But I'm ready to go too. Thank you.
No cap, I'd love to see y'all really get there, but we always keep everything, professional. Oh, and you already know, Reese, how you feeling?
I'm good. I have a fresh, old-fashioned. Ooh, I just dropped my coaster chair. But I'm ready to have a good show. I've been a little spicy today, between Twitter and all that other stuff. So we'll see how spicy I get tonight, yet. But I'm definitely getting my drink on it. Thank you, Kenny. We had a little incident where I accidentally went live. Kenny was DJing for us, so shout out to whoever rocked with us for that 30 seconds. Have a great show.
All right, let's turn up.
Cheers.
Fantastic. Cheers. All right, well, I just want to jump right into it. So, top of the hour, the most notable activities taken this week, Georgia primaries, voting that took place, and in typical fashion, at least under a Kemp, Georgia, we saw tremendous, horrendous, ridiculous lines and delays primarily in the communities that look like ours. With that taking place again in 2020, it does bring a little bit of worry to the same issues that we ran into 2018, 2016 as well. And one of the things that the House Democrats, particularly Kamala Harris, Senate Democrats, particularly Kamala Harris, have been mentioning is the Vote Smart Act. And with that gives us the ability to actually address these, number one, ridiculous delays. Over 200 polling places were actually closed in Georgia. I'm just going to single out Georgia for right now because they're actually relevant. These are intentional. We understand that. These are done to suppress votes. As a matter of fact, I have a friend of mine who I went to high school and now lives in Atlanta, said he was in line for hours on end. He says it like this everywhere. And so to get that first-time perspective, obviously you get to see it from someone, but also from people that you know personally, to say that it was just absolutely ridiculous. But again, people did lend a helping hand when they could. You actually see in situations like this where folks, do the best to bring water, any type of refreshments, to encourage people to stay in line. In any regard, we understand this is an effort to suppress the vote. Actually, I want to open this up to response just because of how important this is, and especially what's going into a general election, going into 2020 November will be here before you know it. And again, as I mentioned before, it does cause some concern. Responses?
Yeah, I always have a response when it comes to voting. Yeah, I wasn't surprised that it was going to happen in Georgia. In some ways, I'm glad it happened during this primary season because it singularly brought attention to Georgia, just like it did when it happened in Wisconsin. If this was during the national election right now and this was happening everywhere, it'd be hard to concentrate. You can see that it got so much attention that Republicans are freaking out about it. Now they're worried that Democrats are actually going to make voting rights a priority for the fall time. So I think that Kamala Harris's Vote Safe Act could get some traction during this time period. At least they know that they're going to have to implement some of the things. The voting machines was something that I was really concerned about. This is something that was new. They have brand new voting machines. These are companies that are buying up other voting machine companies that had previous issues and problems. They all had security issues on these machines, but these weren't even just security issues. The machines weren't working at all. So, and of course they were happening primarily in Black neighborhoods once again. So Georgia, we already know, is going to start this onslaught of voter suppression. We already knew they were going to close polling. Now that it's COVID, they're going to close more. Now we know the machines don't work. So to me, and I wrote this on Twitter, it's time for Georgians to make a plan of what they can do at this point. They need to find out if they need to go to vote.org to make sure they haven't been purged off the rolls. They need to make sure that, because up until 30 days before the election, you have time to re-register your vote. You need to make sure if your polling place is going to be closed, if you can vote at a different polling location. If you're worried about your health, you're going to have to get your absentee ballot. So right now it's 144 days till election day. So I'm asking my fellow Georgians I feel for you, but now is the time to start making the plan. Continue making the plan. I don't want them to say they haven't. I know that they're on it, but I want them to know that Kemp, being the governor now, he has every intention of making sure that this race, he has no bones about it. He wants to make sure the Democrats lose in Georgia.
Well, yeah, I mean it's pretty clear. Like I said, especially 2020, we put a man on the moon in 1969. We tell them we can't get voting machines to work in 2020. That's a doggone shame. I almost said another word there. But also, when you look at the Vote Safe Act, and it even authorized like $5 billion to expand the vote by mail options and early voting. So everyone is not congregating at one time on this one day. Is that, you know what, I can send mine in early, or we can go in early and get that done. Again, this early voting, mail-in voting, these are things, and Republicans have been fighting against. Why? Because those options increase turnout. Increased turnout typically means Republican losses. So that these are, again, things. I think also the bill is actually requires the states to maintain an early voting period for at least 20 days. So it's not even like, okay, it's there, but like give me enough time. 20 days is almost 3 weeks. Again, you can avoid all of this. It's interesting for a country that's founded primarily, at least on paper, on the idea of taxation without representation is wrong. If you are taxing citizens but not allowing them to represent themselves at the polls, clearly, there's an issue there. And so, mind-boggling how folks who love God and country wouldn't stand behind that.
Yeah, one more thing though to add, I don't know if you mentioned it, but there's part of the bill, the Vote Safe Act, is drive-up voting as well, which is really helpful, particularly, when you have elderly people. I saw a pregnant woman in Georgia sitting there with her child. Now, y'all know y'all could have let that lady go ahead and cut y'all instead of sitting out there in the rain with her baby, but I'm not even going to go in on that because none of y'all should have really been having to wait. But it has support for metrics in terms of the wait time and things like that. And so there are a lot of things in that bill that are really good. And really, I've seen, but for instance, Stacey Abrams' Verified Act has signed on to bills that do less. Let's just be clear about the Vote Safe Act. It does all of the things that, let's say, Amy Klobuchar and all these other bills rolled into one. It provides the most funding ever for these things. And we need this stuff now. And we can't continue to treat things as inevitable that they won't go anywhere. We have to put pressure on the Congress to do something about that. But the last point I want to make too is pressure your local elected officials. There are 10,000 jurisdictions, individual jurisdictions that handle voting. Regardless of who's your Secretary of State or what your state level looks like, there is still a local elections jurisdiction that actually executes voting. So that means they are responsible for the poll workers. They are the ones who are, operating the election booths. And so engage on that level, engage on your county level, and make sure that you're holding their feet to the fire and how they're preparing, because it's obvious that as much as people want to blame Kemp, who's absolutely deplorable in Fulton County, there's obviously issues there. And these Democratic counties still have issues with the leadership. And a lot of times in Fulton County in particular, it's bipartisan. It's equal number Democrats and Republicans on their election commission. But we have to hold those folks accountable too, instead of allowing them to throw their hands up and be like, well, the state didn't help. Well, you have a responsibility to your citizens. So if don't just always look at that one person, that one figurehead, look at the people who are actually orchestrating your elections.
Makes sense. Reese, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. Just bringing up the people who were orchestrating the elections, obviously, especially on a local level. I think we overshoot that, especially in general election season. We think top of the ticket, don't think down ballot, especially when it gets to local DA, sheriffs. These are very, very important positions that need to be addressed. Speaking of sheriffs and law enforcement, there's also the Justice and Policing Act. Fantastic. I know it's my opinion. I'm just going to put that out there, though. This is historically legislation, in my humble opinion. If I'm wrong, so what? This ain't your show. Now, in any regard, no, but we actually, the Justice and Policing Act was actually revealed. Reese, would you be able to tell us a little bit about the details with the old-fashioned chasing?
Yeah, you caught me there. So the Justice and Policing Act, it is a landmark, historic piece of legislation. There were 2 hearings on this in the House this week. One of them had Mr. Philonise Floyd, who was the brother of George Floyd, who testified for 7 hours in front of the House Judiciary Committee on the Justice and Policing Act the day after his brother's funeral. Okay. And so that's how significant this bill is. We saw so much testimony about how nothing like the Justice and Policing Act has been put forward. So just to level set, the Justice and Policing Act is legislation that is introduced in both the Senate and are going to be introduced in both the Senate and the House. On the Senate side, Senator Kamala Harris, live with KHive, and Senator Cory Booker led the charge, along with on the House side, Congresswoman Karen Bass, and the Congressional Black Caucus. So this is a bill that has been spearheaded by the Congressional Black Caucus. For those of y'all who like to go up onto the CBC and say, what are y'all doing for us? This is what they're doing for us. Landmark policing reform. Okay, and it addresses a very specific issue of police accountability and police violence. Okay, and so they will tell you that it does not solve everything with the entire policing system, but in the specific issue, it does address that. And in particular, what has precipitated this action, what has precipitated this moment, which is turning into a movement, are the just tragic and horrifying murders of both George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. In the issue of George Floyd, it was the chokehold. And I don't want to say issue, in the murder and the execution and the lynching of George Floyd, it was the chokehold. And the murder, the execution of Breonna Taylor, it was the no-knock warrant that allowed them to bust in there, guns blazing, and shoot her 8 times. And so this bill directly addresses those 2 specific things as well as others. And what I also want to point out is, since this bill has been introduced on Monday, we've actually seen action at the local and state level in several places on these very issues that are addressed in the Justice and Policing Act. Now, the Justice and Policing Act addresses this at a federal level, as well as provides incentives for the states and local jurisdictions to adopt these same things that they're putting out there. So we want to shout out in Louisville, which by the way has unfinished business. And that unfinished business is prosecuting and arraigning and prosecuting and indicting the murderers of Breonna Taylor for just that, for murder. But in terms of the advocacy, we saw Representative Charles Booker, who's running for Senate, not an endorsement. Charles Booker was really on the forefront there. Not endorsement from the KHive. I'm just telling you that. My opinion. I'm not representing my opinion right now. I'm talking about the KHive, not an endorsement. And we saw Attica Scott, who's a state representative as well, who was really out there on the forefront, really pushing this, as well as advocates, activists. I don't want to leave anybody out. So they had the Breonna Taylor bill that bans no-knock warrants in Louisville. So that's an immediate action. That action, that objective is in the Justice and Policing Act. We saw in New York where they're moving towards, it's already passed on both chambers, the Eric Garner anti-chokehold bill that's supported by Eric Garner's mother, Miss Gwen Carr. And so we're starting to see these kinds of things, and there are other places in Colorado. There are 2 Black women leading the charge there, as long as a Latino man. And there's, I believe, Rhonda Fields is a state senator, and then Leslie Herod is a state representative leading the charge. That is going very well. It's already passed the Senate, but that has police accountability. So I say all this to say that it's impactful because it's happening in other places, and that's what we want to see. We want to see a movement. And I believe that this bill, and knowing that this bill was forthcoming, is something that helped give people the impetus to act on this on a local level as well. But I've been talking for a while, so let me just go on ahead and just give you the highlights of what this bill does. It works to end racial profiling, and you can find this information on Senator Kamala Harris's Senate website. There's several pieces of literature on there. There is the full 160-page bill or 30-page bill. Then there's a 2-pager, and there's a 5-pager. So tons of information out there. You can also find it on the House Judiciary Committee, but I'm going to send you to Kamala Harris's website. Okay, that's what I'm going to send you. So go ahead and check her out. Let's see, works to end racial and religious profiling, prohibits federal, state, and local law enforcement from racial profiling, mandates training on racial, et cetera, bias stuff, requires law enforcement to collect data on all investigatory activities. This isn't just a matter of collecting data on arrests, but it also helps us see who was actually being targeted. Are there disproportionate targets of different investigations? And I think that's really important, because we know that we have higher rates of arrest, we have higher targeting of people, despite the fact that, for instance, Black people and white people have similar usage rates and things like that. Saves lives by banning chokeholds and no-knock warrants. I've already addressed that. Where it does is it has federal restrictions, and then what it does is it conditions funding for these local, state and local governments to also ban no-knock warrants, and to also ban chokeholds in order to receive funding from the federal government. That's obviously a huge, massive incentive for them. So the reason why that's important is because we have to understand how jurisdictions work. The federal government does not have jurisdiction over everything. They only have things that don't fall at the state or local level. That's just how we are set up in this country. And so the way that they use their leverage is through their funding. Let's see, requires deadly use to be used only as a last resort, requires officers to employ de-escalation techniques first, changes the standard to evaluate whether law enforcement use of force is justified from whether it was reasonable to and to whether the force was necessary. Okay. And as Kamala likes to say, anybody can reason away anything, but was it actually necessary? Was it necessary for Derek Chauvin to stand there on an already subdued George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes? Absolutely the fuck not. It was not. It was execution. It was murder. And conditions grants in state and local enforcement agencies establishing the same use of force standard. Another thing, it has use of force standards across the board. This is something that I was on Roland Martin yesterday, and Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey is putting in place some of these same things, establishing a standardized use of force and all that kind of stuff. So we're starting to see some momentum at the state level. Get involved in your state level, get involved in your local levels. Limit military equipment on American streets and require body cameras. requires federal uniformed police officers to wear body cameras, requires state and local law enforcement to use existing federal funds to ensure the use of police body cameras. So for those who are opposed for additional funds, for that reason, it's using existing funds. Be clear about what it's saying. Requires marked federal police vehicles to have dashboard cameras, makes it easier to prosecute offending officers by amending the criminal statute to prosecute police misconduct. The mens rea requirement in 18 USC section 242 will be amended from willfulness to recklessness. Standard enables individuals to recover damages in civil court when law enforcement officers violate their constitutional rights by eliminating qualified immunity for law enforcement. Qualified immunity is a huge thing that's allowing these police officers to shirk any kind of responsibility. Investigate police misconduct. It's increasing the powers of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, which has basically been completely dismantled under Barr. Empower our communities to reimagine public safety in an equitable and just way. Reinvest our community by supporting critical community-based programs. Establishes public safety integration grants. Requires law enforcement accreditation standard, recommendations based on President Obama's task force on 21st century policing. New Jersey, again, another thing that Governor Phil Murphy is putting in place is these licensing accreditation type of activities. Wasn't there before, so it's not across the board that they're actually these standards. Let's see, I'm almost towards the end, but I want to see if there's anything I can skip. Enhances funding for pattern practice discrimination investigations and programs managed by the DOJ Community Relations Program. Requires the Attorney General to collect data on investigatory actions and detentions by federal enforcement agencies, the racial distribution of drug charges, the use of deadly force by and against law enforcement officers, as well as traffic and pedestrian stops and detentions. Establishes a DOJ task force to coordinate the investigation, prosecution, and enforcement of federal, state, and local governments in case of law enforcement misconduct. Creates a nationwide police misconduct registry to prevent problematic officers who are fired or leave one agency from moving to another jurisdiction without any accountability. Tamir Rice, the officer who immediately got out and murdered Tamir Rice, he had lied on his application and said that he didn't have any other kind of disciplinary actions. That was a lie. This kind of registry would prevent the next Tamir Rice from happening. And it improves, okay, I already said that. Mandates state local enforcement agencies to report use of force data disaggregated by race, sex, disability, religion, and age, and makes lynching a federal crime. One thing that's not on this spread, on this two-pager is the efforts in terms of juvenile detentions and juvenile law enforcement as well. So there's so many good things to get behind in terms of this Justice and Policing Act. And so we cannot take it as inevitable that this won't pass. You had Rand Paul, that piece of dung, who is using Breonna Taylor's name to take one small piece of the Justice and Policing Act, which is the no knock warrants, and putting that forth as his own bill. Rand Paul support the Justice and Policing Act. Don't try to piecemeal it. And that's what we have to caution against, because the way that this always works is the Democrats put forth something comprehensive, and yet the Republicans put forth 1/10 of what they do, and then people pressure the Democrats to get on board with 1/10 of the solution instead of pressuring the Republicans to get on board with the full solution. And it's not the full solution to everything, but in terms of the solution of the issue of police reform, accountability, that's what we're talking about with the Justice and Policing Act. So please understand there's action happening at the local, state, and federal level. The federal level helps trickle down, helps pressure and provide the support needed for these other local and state jurisdictions. So that's all that I have to say on that for now, unless y'all got something that I think is something else.
Heather, I'm gonna get to you just 1 second, but I gotta make a comment really quickly. One, the officer involved who shot Tamir Rice, correct, did lie and said that he didn't. You're absolutely right. Even though this particular bill would obviously create that national registry for police misconduct. The department that hired him already knew, and it was just a matter of the investigations to go ahead and hire him anyway. I want to let you guys know that police departments and police agencies, local, state, federal, all liaise. They are all. I make the comment all the time. All police departments are not, or excuse me, all law enforcement agencies are not created equal. So such and such PD is not as good as such and such PD in another state or area, or the sheriff's office is not on par with this state agency over here. There's not much uniformity there. There's also much better trained law enforcement agencies than others, but they knew whenever they bring on officers, they call those previous departments. They ask for all that information. They knew, and they still took them on. So I just want to make that point very, very clear. So, but this is still fantastic and excellent as far as keeping people accountable. Absolutely. But in that case, go ahead.
But I also want to point out, because I do think, and I think that you're correcting the record is absolutely warranted. However, I do want to point out that a lot of times people do like to point to, well, this still would have happened. And you can't prevent 100% of the things that happen because of human nature. And some people just have it in their mind, hey, I'm going to do this. But a lot of part of I'm going to do this is believing they can get away with it. And that's where the accountability comes in. And so it's trying to prevent behaviors. It's trying to change behaviors through training, through different laws and different things like that, accreditations. But also importantly, it's saying, well, if you do skip over all that shit, if you go on ahead and say, okay, my body camera's on, I don't care, I'm still going to act book. I don't care that it's illegal to do this. I don't care. When you do that, understand there are going to be consequences, and understand that, you know, there are going to be criminal consequences, and there are also going to be civil consequences. So I think that we have to still keep in mind that it's not just about trying to reform behaviors, it's also about accountability. And accountability is why people go in the streets in the first place, because number one, they're like, we're tired of this happening, but we're also tired of there being no consequences.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. It's oversight. There's got to be checks and balances. We're a country of checks and balances, right? See, government, well, we used to be before this administration, but prior to that, we had checks and balances where different systems of government would go ahead and keep everything somewhat equal. Another thing I like about that bill, though, the mandating the use of the dashboard cameras and the body cameras for federal officers. Again, this ties back to Kamala Harris. We're going back to California. Yeah, obviously, her input is in there. Obviously, pioneering the body cam program here in California, making her agents use it. I want people to understand that DOJ officers had to use when wear those body cameras and keep them on. So that's that there. So but we.
Can I say one more thing too, though? So right now there are 35 co-sponsors of the Justice and Policing Act in the Senate. And so a lot of people are saying, well, how do we get the GOP to pass? Well, we need to get everybody on board, but we can also start with putting pressure on the remaining Democrats that are not co-sponsors of the bill. Because if you're going to be in the Democratic Party, if you're going to be a Democratic senator, then we need to make sure next time your primary comes up, this is going to be a referendum on you. So we have to put pressure on everybody that has not signed on. 65 people that have not signed off onto the Justice and Policing Act, and a good number of those are Democrats. Put pressure on those folks. And then once we get to, if we're 2 or 3 votes away from the majority, I don't know, it could need 60 votes, but we definitely the most logical people to put pressure on are the Democrats, because y'all the ones that's supposed to be the party of, of fairness and justice and equal justice for all. So why don't we do that? But if you don't have a Democratic senator, then put pressure on whoever your senator is. But we definitely cannot let the Democrats that do not sponsor this bill off the hook in the Senate.
Fantastic. Heather, I know you put your hand up. I know you wanted to jump in on this real quick. Get in on it.
Oh yeah, I mean, Reese kind of hit on everything there. But what I was just gonna say is, even piggybacking off of what Reese just said, you know what I mean? Like, you can't say Black Lives Matter and then not support legislation. So yeah, we definitely need to be as you know what I mean, Americans and people who care about this, we need to be reaching out to our representatives and pushing them to, you know what I mean, sign on to these bills, specifically this one. There were two things that kind of jumped out to me with this bill. The first one was, I had never seen this before, was and I mean, I don't consider myself an expert by any means in this, but the whole police accountable in court aspect of it, I thought that was incredible, just because they were talking about, you know what I mean, taking them to court civilly, as well as, you know what I mean, if there's not going to be a criminal charge, just having people have the ability to reach into these cops' pockets. You know what I mean? If by any means, if you're not going to protect us and you're going to be kind of a terror to our communities, you know what I mean, at least we can get back in that way. So I thought that was incredible. And then the other aspect was, and I think this is kind of something that Drew, you talked about, but it was the reimagining public safety. That was something where I think if we have those in place, where we're empowering our communities, we're empowering organizations, we're empowering people on a local level to get more involved with the police, then maybe that's something that, you know, like you were saying with Tamir Rice and that officer, maybe that's something that doesn't necessarily happen, you know what I mean, down the line. So I thought that those two things, I mean, there was a lot about this bill that really stood out, but those two things really kind of jumped out to me. And so I just wanted to kind of touch on that really quickly.
Appreciate you doing that. And people tripping over some kente cloth. Read the damn bill. Shoot. Worry about kente cloths and knees and stuff. Goodness gracious. No, but Heather, I'm glad you mentioned that. It actually kind of leads into what I wanted to mention next, which was the outrage and the I don't want to call it debacle, but the uprising over the term defund the police, or the phrase to defund the police, and some of the confusion and such that took place. Kenny, brother, you are the most famous person on this panel when it comes to this particular topic. I'm going to go ahead and just say you got all the clout when it comes to this, bro. So if you can go ahead and fill us in on this.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So, I mean, I get a lot of flack and a lot of support. It's a mixed bag on this situation when it comes to defund the police, because there's two different conversations happening. And one thing that I have to admire about Kamala is that, honestly, when people mention defund, I was literally ready to just throw the whole conversation away, because the framing of it is almost as abolitionist. And there are two different conversations happening. Some people are saying, let's defund the police, let's reallocate the funds back into the community, is what Heather was talking about, in terms of rethinking how we look at police, how we think about, you know, safety when we're talking about public safety. And that's one thing that I love about what Kamala Harris was doing in terms of framing it, to make it actually more, you know, digestible for people to actually understand and actually get a grasp on what people are basically trying to say. But there's still two different conversations. Some people are saying let's reallocate the funds back into the community. Some people are saying let's just get rid of police altogether. Let's not do this. But one thing that I think that I have to admire about all the things that's going on is about, this is nothing new to Kamala Harris. She's always talked about, we have to rethink public safety. We have to invest back into the communities. We don't need that many police officers on the street. We don't need all of this stuff happening. We don't have to militarize the police. We actually need the police to actually look like the communities that they're serving. And that's one thing that Kamala Harris has actually been doing. But when it comes to defund the police, like I said, I was on the wrong, or not the wrong side, but I was on a different side of it, looking at to the point of saying, okay, so if we're going to get rid of the police, how do we protect our neighborhoods? What's going to happen with that? Like, what about, you know, because the other conversation that was going on with, you know, defund the police, let's go ahead and get rid of correctional facilities. Now, I'm not for that. And I think a lot of people aren't. But the way Kamala Harris is framing it, what she did with terms of Megan, and she's asking a question, is how are you defining defund the police? Are you talking about reallocating the funds, reinvesting? Are you talking about demilitarization, or are you talking about abolition? And one thing that I don't know if you guys actually watched the interview with Kamala Harris on Nick Cannon's radio show. He is an abolitionist, and Kamala Harris was actually able to go on to that platform and actually talk to them and actually reach over to that side to actually give them substance to where they're actually able to, you know, I guess, debate their talking points in a substantive way that's actually able to be, you know, absorbed by other people on the other side. So that's one thing that I've actually, you know, admired about what Kamala Harris has been doing in terms of actually talking about defunding the police. She hasn't said whether she supports it or not, but one thing that she is in support of is at least trying to redefine policing, redefine how we're actually looking at communities, how we're actually looking at investing back into the community. So that's one thing that I obviously admire about Kamala Harris when this topic comes up. But I know I wasn't the only one on this side. Sydney, I think you was the other person who was feeling the kind of the same way about this. Oh, we got to get rid of the police officers. What we gonna do? Who we call? What happens if somebody's burgling my house? Who I call? I ain't got no gun. But go ahead, Sydney.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for swinging it to my way, Kenny. And I want to just kind of speak to kind of like where my position was initially with the conversation about abolition. Again, as Kenny mentioned, there are two different conversations being had. And what I do see from folks, majority of us all agree on one central thing. The police have way too much power from the bottom up. I mean, we're talking the smallest precincts with the smallest villages, all the way up to, you know, the federal level. We're seeing time and time again that police budgets overshadow, you know, even budgets for public health. You know, in my hometown, Chicago, you know, Rahm Emanuel ushered in the closing of hundreds, over I believe thousands of mental health facilities here in Chicago during one of the, you know, during a wave of mass violence. You know, we had summers and summers of, you know, just mass violence throughout the city. And his solution was we're going to shut down the mental health facilities, and we're gonna bring in more policing. We're going to bring in the National Guard. And what we see here is that leads to mass incarceration. That leads to more profiling. That leads to more, you know, to you know, less community advancement, I should say. And what is the result of that, particularly here in Chicago, is mass gentrification. And so what it looks like, and I understand exactly what a lot of my peers believe, is that, you know, this is a plan. You know, they don't want to. They you know, we're under policed and over policed at the same time. So, you know, the plan is okay. You know, the police aren't going to intervene until, you know, there's mass shootings. I mean, Chicago has had mass shootings every summer, literally, that don't get any coverage because majority of the victims are, you know, Black, and the shooter is Black or brown or whatever the case might be. So, you know, we don't look at crime committed by Black and brown people the same way that we view crime committed by white people. And that is where the initial conversation about changing the culture, you know, begins. And that is what defunding the police actually entails. And what I want to caution people with this conversation, because once I actually realized that we were all having the same conversation, I was like, okay, I get it. Defund the police, take money, you know, demilitarize the police, take that money that we use to boost these police budgets, you know, where police are engaging in, you know, mass misconduct. You know, there is no accountability. We see time and time again that, you know, police are using that taxpayers have to pay, you know, for, you know, police misconduct. You know, when someone dies, you know, or is harmed by the police, you know, there's a saying on the street that goes, you know, when you get involved with a police officer, you want to make sure that you sue them. You want to make sure that they abuse you so that you can be, you know what I'm saying, you can go ahead and get that money, that civil suit. And police officers know this. They know that, you know, that they don't have much accountability when it comes to that. And they're not going to be asked to have much accountability. And that is where the conversation of defunding, demilitarizing, and reform and 180 reform comes from. And my time is almost up, but I just want to add this, that, you know, this is not going to be something that happens overnight, but it is achievable. We need to think about the ways in which we look at policing and crime and just communities in general in the United States, and places, again, like Angola, should not exist in 2020. And there are plenty of other prisons across the country that mirror Angola, that mirror, that of slavery plantations, that should not exist in this country. And that means that, we're going to have to start treating inmates and, folks who commit crimes, we're going to have to start looking at them as human beings before, they get to, before they get to a prison cell. And, we need to think more about harm reduction as opposed to, overt or over criminalization.
Maya, I know you want to chime in. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So one of the things that this panel has in common is we all like policy, and we all like the solutions that policy affords. And this is why we like Kamala Harris, because she's talking about policies and how do we move forward and how do we move these conversations forward. I also think that there was a massive overreaction this week when people were discussing defunding or abolition. And I want people to understand that these words, reform, defund, and abolition are three separate things, okay? Reform is something that can happen right now. It's something where, you can do what our governor did today, which you ban chokeholds, which is already banned in New York, but that's a whole other story. You can do pieces of policy right now. Defund only means that you are reducing the money that is allocated. Right now we have $117 billion allocated to police across the United States, okay? That's a ton of money. And if you look at other investments in healthcare and mental health and wellness programs, those numbers don't match up, okay? And education. And then abolition is getting rid of the entire structure. The reason why all of those things can work together is because abolition will take a long time. Defunding is something you can do right now. Reform can happen immediately with pieces of policy on like local and state levels. And I want to say that when I say defunding, people get frustrated with that. People get more scared when I say the word abolition. The reason why people are talking about abolition is you cannot separate the police from prison and jails and private jails, okay? I think that we realize that all these marches that are happening right now is to do with institutionalized racism, systemic racism. Our policing and our prisons are completely down to the floor, up to the ceilings, full of systemic racism. The idea that we're going to do a couple of reforms here and there, and that is going to end the aspect of systemic racism isn't a possibility. And if you look at the history of this country, there has been, I see you, Kenny, I will wrap it up in a minute. And I see you, Sydney, too. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. Our country has already had studies done since 1930s about how racism is just such a part of the police, and it's a part of our prison system. Black men and now women have always served longer sentences, more time, are thrown into prison more than white people. If you're comparing it to population, right? From 1990. I would say, actually, I think it's 1979. 1979 through the Reagan administration, it doubles, okay? So we know that this system is broken. I think, and I'm going to end with this on this part, people have to realize that when we're having conversations about abolition, it's not that scary once you realize when we talk about prison and how we treat prisoners. I went to a panel and sat with people that are re-entrants. That means re-entering into society. These people were beaten, raped inside of prison, put in solitary confinement, didn't have any access to health care, mental care. It is grotesque. And the worst part, I'm about to get on the pulpit, I'm going to calm down. And the worst part of it is they expect you to go back into society where you're not able to get jobs because it's it's on your record now. And you're treated like garbage. So the entire system, which is supposed to be about reforming people or rehabilitating people, is not that. So that is why when we're talking about abolition, we can't be like, that's scary, that's gross. Well, so is this entire prison system, and so is what's happening with the police. So we have to be able to have these conversations without people saying, you're too radical or you're too this.
Thank
because
you.
to me,
Thank
it
you.
is radical to throw Black bodies into prison all the time for fucking
I agree.
weed. You know what I mean?
I
So
agree.
so that's why I'm saying. So we shouldn't be scared of the. I'll end with this. Promise. We shouldn't be scared of the conversation of defund. We shouldn't be scared of the conversation of reform. But we should also be happy when we start seeing people doing things at the same time. Like when people are saying they're not doing anything, it's like we are starting to do something. So I want us to be happy or feel joy about that. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Okay, just to add to your point, so with abolitionists, I think the problem is with that word abolish means to get rid of, and I think what we need to do is rethink how we should frame it, because as you said before many times, is Democrats have an issue when it comes to, branding a certain policy or an idea, because what it basically does is it either scares some people or it makes people outraged or some people are for it. But what we're hearing, and I think this is where the issue that I have with it is when I was talking about with people when it comes to abolishment, is we can't completely get rid of law enforcement altogether. And what a lot of people don't understand is this is something that's going to take several years to get to. It's going to be, it's an idea to
let me say this, Kenny, real fast. I don't want to take up all the time. We shouldn't say things like we cannot get rid of. We should not say that, because what we're doing is limiting conversation when we say stuff like that. If we're going to say we're going to decriminalize marijuana, you say that 20 years ago and people were like, oh my God, we got to have a war on drugs. My parents, today's Loving Day, was a white Latina woman and a Black man. And those laws were to throw more Black people in prison if they decided they were going to date a white person, or a Latin person. And people in this country said we should never get rid of that. We should not cross over in races. So I don't think it is helpful to a conversation to say we should never do that. If we speak in absolutes, that means we're not approaching having discussions like we're all having here. We're literally having this discussion right now. So I think we should stay open to having conversations, just like when abolitionists say, what you guys are doing is absolutely wrong. It's kind of like, okay, it's not correct on that end either to say, you're doing everything wrong, shut up. It's not helpful with the conversation. So to me, I'm saying, let's listen to you, but also like, what steps are we doing with policy right now?
But I think what's great about what Kamala Harris is doing is, so for people who are literally like, okay, let's not get rid of law enforcement, she puts it and frames it in a way to where, okay, so what we can do is we're trying to get to a point. So what we're trying is revision how we look at law enforcement. And that's one thing that I admire about what Kamala Harris is doing, because a lot of people who are just closed-minded to the idea entirely is like, okay, the way Kamala Harris is framing it, I'm for that. I'm for, reallocating the funds back into, mental health and back into schools, back to actually to actually help being smart on crime, basically, which is education. So when she frames it like that, it makes it to where people are actually able to understand it, which I think is important in the time that we're at right now. So Joe Biden, pay attention. But somebody who's actually trying to actually change the system and actually be able to give policies where people are actually able to digest it and understand it, that's something that Kamala Harris is uniquely positioned to do. That's something that's really unique, especially in a politician, to actually be able to reach across each aisle to where everybody's able to actually look at it from the same frame. So we can have these open conversations without tearing each other down and saying, oh, well, you're dumb, I'm smart, and all that, you're wrong and I'm right. That's what's so unique about what Kamala Harris is doing with this entire conversation. She's not closing the door, she's actually opening it up for people who are like, okay, we can't do this, but actually we can. How we can basically do it is reach across the aisle and actually use this right framing, the right wording, to where people are actually able to actually absorb it. But go ahead.
But I think though that we get so caught up on the framing, and to Maya's point, let's say you have the abolitionist people who are like, you over there, you're saying reimagine and reform, and everybody gets caught up on the specific term, and the specific terms do have meaning, But then there is a knee-jerk reaction to hold this litmus test, to hold this sort of, this is the bar that I'm laying down for where you're right or where you're wrong, based on the specific term. And so the defund people are like, reimagine. I ain't trying to hear reimagine. And then the reimagine people are like, I ain't trying to hear defund. And then the defund people, I ain't trying to hear abolish. And we go on this vicious cycle. And the problem is we consume and we converse in sound bites, in slogans, in 280 characters, in captions, and headlines. And we try to win a news cycle. We try to win a tweet cycle. We try to win the day on Twitter. We try to win the day on YouTube. We try to win the day in the media, instead of having long, in-depth conversations that are substantive, that don't have a winner and loser of a conversation, that have a period of enlightenment, of accepting new information and saying, I'm open. And I love what you say, Maya. I'm open to what you have to say. I'm open to what you have to say, because that's where I'm at. Give me something that's tangible. Give me something that makes sense. Give me the specific legislative way that you can implement this. Which legislative officials are you going to talk to? What's the bill going to look like? What's the name going to be? What's the funding going to be? What's this, that, and the other going to be? If you can give me all those things, I'm completely on board with you. But these moral high grounds and these soapboxes that people want to put themselves on, these pedestals, because, oh, I'm a person, I don't think that it's good enough to say this. Okay, well then that's fine, but that's not moving us forward. And so that's what I think, it's so hard. And this isn't just a police reform issue. This is just a societal issue. And we have a communication problem, because it's all about what fits right here. And our attention span is so all over the place and so narrow that we don't get anywhere. But, and again, one more thing to Maya's point, there is a body of work behind these things. The problem is, a lot of the people that push these things are not pushing them from a point of the body of work. They're pushing it from what they've seen in memes, what they've seen in headlines, what they've seen in captions. So you have caption people talking to caption people, and all of the work behind it is getting completely lost, and we're in a stalemate. And so that's where we have to challenge ourselves to actually elevate our discourse, elevate our interest level, and elevate how we're going to challenge ourselves to implement the changes that we want to see.
Okay,
I just want to add one more. I just want to add one more point really fast. And this comes from the standpoint of someone who is involved with nonprofits. And this is something I wanted to touch on because of what Maya has stated about the bodies of work that go into this. For my peers who have worked, in community police or community-based policing organizations, or organizations that were erected to, stop the violence. For those of you who are watching in Chicago, y'all know everybody had a ceasefire sticker on their car in the mid 2000s to early, ceasefire was coming to our schools. I was a part of ceasefire. And what happened to those organizations during the last recession was that a lot of these organizations lost funding. They lost the momentum, just like the mental health facilities, just like our public school system, our 501Cs, they lost that were dedicated to ending the violence, or ending, or community policing options that were dedicated to that. A lot of these organizations had to disband within the last 10 years because they don't have funding. They don't have support. Ceasefire was one of the biggest ones in Chicago that, was dedicated to, solutions in the community that would stop gun violence. And I know that a lot of people who are saying that, abolition can't be done, they come from the standpoint of seeing that, reform isn't enough. But what I want to stress is that we haven't actually started really reforming police. We haven't actually gotten to the nitty gritty of, policing reform at a federal level. What we've seen is, we've seen talks from organizations throughout the years that have, gone out their way to try to get funding, try to get support from the community. And they've done, as much as they could with the resources that they had. But we have not seen, federal oversight of policing. We have not seen real reform in policing yet. So that's what the defund, demilitarize, and abolition, eventual abolition movement looks like. It looks like real comprehensive reform from a federal government level, not just community level, because the communities are doing what they need to do. The community organizers are out here, and shout out to everyone who is involved with, organizations such as Ceasefire in Chicago. Shout out to Ceasefire. I'm not sure if you guys are still around, but if you are, we still appreciate you. I know that you guys made an impact on my life as a young teen, and I know that countless others can say the same. But I want to stress to my peer group, we're looking at a different type of reform here. Reform, this is a different type of movement, and we need to have these real conversations about the future of policing, because something has to be done, and right away, because this carnage cannot continue.
All right, I'm gonna hand this over to you, Heather, after I make this point, because to Sydney's point, what she's basically saying is, I know a lot of people who say that, you know, I voted, I've done what I needed to do, but a lot of people aren't involved. One thing that we have to understand is voting does make difference. It does make a difference. Legislation does make a difference. Like everything that we're talking about is already in the legislature. Some of these things are already literally in Kamala Harris's, you know, policing act. So you guys have to stay involved. You have to vote, because what's important to understand is that your local DAs, some of your DAs are they're elected officials, so you have to vote. Some of these things that we're talking about right now, this is some of the things that Kamala Harris did by herself, like running up the long trail of the mountain as DA. She did this. She believed in pattern and practicing investigations. She believed in misconduct and discrimination cases. She believed in all of these things. She implemented it. But it's hard to do it when you're doing it by yourself. So voting does matter. So please stay involved locally, and we also need to pay attention to what's going to happen in November. We have to vote. If you believe that Black Lives Matter, the way that you can hashtag it and everything else, vote like Black Lives Matter. But I'm gonna go ahead and switch that over to you, Heather.
Vote, please get out and vote, y'all.
So I guess y'all are just gonna hit on all my points before I even say anything, right? Because I mean, come on. No, what I was gonna say was, yeah, just speaking to, this is why I personally, I support Kamala so much, because Senator Kamala Harris is what I should say. But because, I mean, she has literally dedicated her career to doing this, you know what I mean? So when she speaks about, even though she, you know what I mean? When she's talking about not only police reform, but also in a bigger picture, criminal justice reform, you know what I mean? She is always pointing to safer communities. You know what I mean? That is our goal. She is always pointing to, we don't need more police on the streets. We need to take funding and invest it into education. We need to invest it into mental health. We need to invest it into housing. She always just brings it around. And so I want to encourage everyone to go and look at her criminal justice reform panel that she did. However, it's on her YouTube. Check that out, because she literally touches on so many of these points, specifically in terms of how we get from where we are now to how we get to where we are in the future, where we want to be in terms of safer communities. And then, you know what I mean? That's why I just love the fact that with this justice and policing legislation that was put forth, you know what I mean? She is the one that is leading on this. I mean, I know we point to many other people in the Congressional Black Caucus, we point to Booker, we point to all of these others, but you could just tell the way that she was connecting all of these points, the way that she was speaking to people who not only, you know what I mean, may not be as knowledgeable about all of this, but also people who are doing the work in terms of activists, you know what I mean? The way she was saying, I hear you, I know what you're talking about. We're not there yet, but this is something that can get us towards our goals. So I really appreciated that. And then the other thing is that I just want to say, like Maya touched on, like we can't, Maya and Reese, they both touched on this, but like we can't get into this I kind of feel like it's a little bit of a fear of focusing on words, on the term itself. Like you have an issue with the word defund because you're worried about, oh, Trump and attacks and the GOP, and no matter what we say, they're going to attack it. So I feel like, you know, one thing that would be helpful is obviously if all of the Democrats can get one cohesive message and push that, and that is, you know what I mean, the talking points are the talking points, and this is what we want to say, and whatever the term is, that's what we're going to call it. Because I think the issue is that happens in terms of marketing and branding things is that we have some people who say one thing, and then we have some people who are saying another thing, but basically like they're saying the same thing. but it's not clear to voters and all of us. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Y'all keep hitting on all my points, so I'm gonna need for y'all to stop doing that because I want to say something too. But yeah, that's it.
You said you didn't want to cover this topic, so we was
Right,
worried about
we
this.
was
So
gonna,
you
we
said
heard
that.
you. We was gonna make sure. Okay. We
Okay.
heard
Okay,
that.
I
Thank
knew
you,
y'all was
thank
gonna have
you.
some. I knew this topic was good. But
I knew it.
before I throw it over to Reese, about that census thing, I'm gonna tell y'all something. The Black people who are watching this, child, we gotta fill out that census. Child. If it wasn't for Kamala Harris, I wouldn't have filled it out because I know in the Black community, at least in my family, child, they say
Child,
don't
do
fill
y'all
it out.
census,
They're trying
please.
to find us and stuff like that, conspiracy things. But fill it out. It's important for the community. Please do
Child,
it.
please do the census. Y'all, please, for real, do the census. Do it.
One thing I do want to just kind of make one point, and then I want to acknowledge Ruben, who made two good points. Number one, I just want to say that Kamala Harris actually has been making a pitch for defunding, which is not she doesn't use the slogan, just to be clear, but she has been using a pitch for that in the sense of her Back on Track program, which was the first in the nation program that actually, if you go back to that clip of her at Tavis Smiley's town hall, where she talks about how in terms of investments, in terms of the investments that the public makes in our public health, our public safety, our safe communities, it makes more sense to invest in prevention. It makes more sense to invest in reentry, to Maya's point of people coming out of the system so that they don't recidivate, meaning go back into the system. And so she talked about how it is cheaper to actually have a program that gives people dental work, free dental care, that gives them counseling, that gives them parenting classes, that gives them jobs. And if you call my interview for Latifah Simon, I'm not saying it to plug it because, like I said, I don't get compensated for my interviews, but I do think that it's really important to understand the background behind it with the Back on Track program. This is kind of to the point that the Defund group makes is we don't have those investments in these kind of programs. She had to go get investments from private philanthropic investments because there was no money inside the DA. And she was the DA and she still didn't have the money. She had to open up that Rolodex to get private donations to create the Back on Track program. She had to open up that Rolodex, in the words of Latifah Simon, and call up Nordstrom and say, give these babies jobs. And so that was, if you go back to 2005, day one in Kamala Harris's administration as the district attorney, she sat down with Latifah Simon and she said, let's create a program, a reentry program. These were two Black women, probably one of the youngest DAs, first Black woman to be DA in the state of California. And another Black woman, Latifah Simon, amazing activist and organizer who came to work for Kamala, created Back on Track. And so when you talk about defund, when you talk about reinvestment, when you talk about reimagining, these are the kinds of things where you're investing in people, even though those people are the people that people don't believe should be invested in. The program was called Hug-a-Thug. The program was called Back on Crack. Those are the people that society says should be thrown away because they have these drug offenses or whatever else. That's what she, at that time, this is 15 years ago now, said that those are the people that need to have investments in them. And so that's the last point I want to make on that. But the other point I just want to make is that to Ruben Martinez, thank you. Let's just take a moment to recognize the victims, post nightclub victims. This is the anniversary of that hate crime, that terrorist attack, that just appalling thing. So we definitely want to take a moment to recognize those victims. That's a moment of silence for them. And then we also want to take a moment to recognize Medgar Evers, who was absolutely an incredible activist. This is the anniversary of his assassination as well. And so we try to always recognize things, that are historically important, things that are important in the current event. So thank you, Ruben, for emphasizing that so that we can, give proper recognition to those two very important historic moments that have happened, tragic historic moments.
I've been holding it in.
Go ahead, Drew. Let it out.
Yeah. So I want to make a couple points, at least to this, Kate. I agree with, we get way too caught up with this titling and defund and all that. Look, what are we trying to do? Like, just get the title and all that. We understand that. First off, you cannot, Maya, thank you so much for bringing up that point. where you can't completely cut off, because if you have no aspiration, you have no goals, like if there's nothing you're really working towards, and you're really just spinning your wheels. One of the things that I look at though is that I would love to imagine a world, and we can work toward a world where I don't want, and this dips into Kenny's point as well, where law enforcement or police officers, how can I put it, are not in the same capacity as we know them today. Okay. A couple things I really want to bring up. First off, Kamala Harris prosecuted a man at one point who literally scalped his girlfriend. Like he took that and they had actually surgically reattached her head. This is his girlfriend. I say that also in the same breath that I live in a world in America today where women can get beat up or killed if they simply tell a man no for anything, whether it's sex, whether it's simply getting your phone number. Okay, that happens. I say that to say this because of things like toxic masculinity, because of other, pervasive ills that we have in society and culture. Bad people exist, and that's what I want to really always I keep in mind here. So in my mind, I think that we wouldn't have to attack and get rid of the things that cause these type of actions to happen. At the same time as we reimagine law enforcement. Another thing I wanted to mention, let's say if we were to get rid of law enforcement as we know it today, even get rid of it as far as like, okay, there's no police, and it's more of a community-based, or it's a neighborhood type of, everyone looking out for each other. Trayvon Martin was killed by George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman is not a police officer. Neighborhood watch. Neighborhood watch captain, wannabe vigilante.
Ooh, Drew, you better say that.
And what happens is when I remove, because for all intents and purposes, there are no police involved. Obviously, yeah, George Zimmerman made the call, but he already made up his mind what he's going to do. But when we remove that and we empower folk in the community, especially neighborhood watch, what's to not think that these people will not use these biases that they have as normal folk to exact vigilante type justice on people, especially when it's just a kid walking down the street, with some skills and some iced tea on his way back to see the All-Star game. That's something that I want to bear in mind. Also, I'm from South Jersey. People don't know that. I'm born in West Philly, raised in South Jersey, 20 minutes outside of Camden, New Jersey. I remember when I was growing up, even in high school, how Camden was and the reputation it had. And it was like that even there when I was growing up. Like, you knew that, oh, you going to Camden. It was like going into a war zone. For Camden, New Jersey to be the focus. I remember the actual Camden Police Department. I remember them, not Camden County Police Department. I remember Camden Police Department. For them to be in the discussion now, the way they are, I never would imagine this when I was in 10th, 11th grade or 9th grade. Never. I could not in my wildest dreams fathom. So to Maya's point, nothing's impossible, right? But at the same time, what Camden did was reimagine law enforcement. So I don't need my city SWAT police department. We're going to allocate it to the county. We're going to pay officers a little bit less. It's still New Jersey, so you're still getting paid good. The New Jersey cops make more money than most police officers. Just want to put that out there by the way. But again, there's still a presence. They're local in the community. They're on the beat. They get to know people. They know the folks by name. How you doing, Miss Williams, Johnson, St. Church, all that. So there's a relationship there, and it seems to be working. The numbers speak for themselves. Numbers don't lie. But again, there's still a presence and there's still a defense. The other thing I wanted to mention was we live in a country where there's a Second Amendment, where there's a right to bear arms. Right now, we don't even have an assault weapons ban. Now, I'm not saying we can't get one passed, but I'm saying that we definitely need to explore that. And not even when we get past that, I need to live in a society where people don't think that, like, people just inherently think that shooting children is a bad idea. I need that to be the norm, right? I mean, I guess it is, but at the same time, our gun stats don't tell me that. I think too many people, it's a good idea to shoot children like you're at a targeting practice. Again, when I live in a country that has that kind of culture and we're as developed as we are, we lead the world in gun crime and gun homicides and gun crimes like that. it becomes difficult to imagine a world without police, in my mind, because when you have people who literally have, I want you to know, you have the gun, you have the power of God in your hand. I can take a life. I feel like, again, we mentioned checks and balances. You have to have checks and balances for that. Okay, you have that, but I need something to be able to check you, so something is not over that. The other thing that I mentioned that is, well, that's actually my point there, is that the accountability. When there is no accountability, there is chaos. We see that in policing today. There is limited accountability. And because of that, there's officers and departments that are running wild and literally doing whatever they want, feeling like they're invincible. The thing about police officers, though, they're pulled from the human race. These are people, they grow up. They don't get folk, I what I'm saying, they're not grown on the planet cop and then shipped here to police us. These folk grew up with you. There was a football team, basketball team, track, all that. They were, wow, the safety in your elementary school, they were, all that. Meaning that society as a whole is subject, or at least susceptible to the same type of chaos if accountability is removed. You have nothing to check you, nothing to say, hey, you obviously you want to be the best in everyone, but still, if there's no level of accountability there, in this case, law enforcement, again, that's something that when we talk about abolishing, we got a lot of other things we got to address before that. And the other thing I want to mention was that globalization. We live in a much smaller world than we did even 15 years ago, even 20 years ago, 10 years ago, to be honest with you. Let's just say, hypothetically, if we were to get to a point in America where we were able to abolish policing entirely, right? And I guess militarization is kind of in that too, but even still. But we'll just say we'll abolish policing. The world is this small. If I'm in another country where the majority of the people in the world don't live here, so if there's other countries where there's economic anxiety, where there are injustices, where folks feel vulnerable, or people see opportunity to take advantage of vulnerable people who are unprotected, they can just come here and then set up shop with nothing to guard you. And so one of the things that I feel like, yes, we definitely need to reimagine the way police and law enforcement are used and implemented in our society. I think that we need to abolish the way policing is done. So the overreach of police, absolutely. I think we definitely need to abolish that. That's why I love Kamala Harris and what she's doing as far, again, reinvesting into mental health and reinvesting into social work and reinvesting into folks who are able to respond to calls of that nature where you don't need police. This is not an issue of crime. It's an issue of someone needs help. Drug addiction, same thing. But again, we're on a planet with over 7 billion people. And unless you address everything, completely wipe out poverty altogether on the planet, completely wipe out racism, I feel like, in my opinion, what I've seen is that you're always going to need something for a check and a balance, something to hold something accountable, and then have something to hold that system accountable, and make it simple, and it's possible. And so that's what I want to leave you guys with. I know we spent a lot of time on the subject, but I had to get my 2 cents in there because I come from a military family and I got cops in my family and certain friends too. And so I'm thinking about so I'm just looking at it from another perspective. But all right, we're good. Okay.
I think we're on the same level, Drew, at least in terms of that. I think we're just looking at the aspiration to get to where we're trying to go.
Yeah,
but we can get there. We can get there, and it's going to take some time. I think Kamala and this whole discussion needs to be happening. I think, around so that we can actually move to that level, because what's been happening right now isn't working. And a lot of people can all agree on that.
Absolutely. You lit a fire. I appreciate that. No, since you did that, I do want to jump to you. There's a woman named Rachel Bennett. I was gonna say Benedict. Yeah, what's going on?
So it's interesting to me because I think it's a good transition from talking about systemic issues. Rachel, I can use as an example of a systemic issue. She is a political forecaster. She is a white woman, and she was talking. She had originally said that Kamala Harris was an A+ VP pick. Then the Black Lives Matter protests started happening, and she's like, "Oh, Black people aren't going to want to have, a cop, a person in law enforcement." So the issue right away was that Rachel should not be talking about what Black people want. That is not for her to talk about. She should keep our ideas out of her mouth. Okay. Second, to me, she is part of a larger issue, right? So in political forecasting and polling data and newspapers and media, they all work together. And my frustration was that Rachel right now has a bit of a name for herself. So it means that she has influence. And so for her to say that really bothered me, because to me, it right away, the newspaper people were like, wait, what? What did Rachel say? Does that change her model? What's going on now? And that frustrated me. So obviously she has changed her mind this week. She got a lot of pushback from people, but I think she also just doesn't know anybody that's Black. I don't think she's talked to anybody that's Black. So I just think that she realized that she changed her mind. And she says that Kamala Harris is my A+ person again. And she has been saying what a great pick she is. Now she's saying she's really cool. So I'm glad she changed her mind. And now Reuters and AP News in the last couple of hours, AP came out and confirmed that Kamala Harris is in the top 6 of who's being vetted right now. But then Reuters just came out in the last hour and saying that Kamala is the pick. They believe is going to be her. So that's been a very interesting turn of events. Now, I bring up to say that it parallels the systemic issues because actually I just wrote an article that might be coming out next week about the media and how I feel that one of the things that we're having issues with and how Kamala was covered in the past and maybe how she'll be covered again if she becomes vice president is that we have conglomerates that are run by white males and they have an agenda. The advertisings they're working with have an agenda, and then those agendas got sent to newsrooms, and then the newsrooms have an agenda, okay? So to me, when we're talking about systemic issues of prison and we're having systemic, we have in our country lots of huge problems that can't just be taken care of by one little change or the other. However, right now it's 144 days before the election. We're not going to get rid of conglomerates in 144 days, okay? So what we can do during this time period is recognize that we have a system of people that are, and I like to say this because Reese likes to say it, so I like to echo her where she says this. We have a group of people that are not culturally competent. They're not going to know how to discuss this election. They're not going to know how to discuss the issues that we care about. And those are people that are not only all over our newsroom, but they're the ones that own the stations, that are the advertisers. And so that is what I'm saying. So when I'm asking people to talk about these bigger, larger issues that are affecting all our lives, I'm asking to step back and say, can those things change in smaller ways? Sure. Should they change in larger ways? Yes. And why is that? Because all of these white guys that own all of these newspapers are not all of a sudden going to be like, you know what we need to do? We need to make sure that we're reporting fairly on Black people. I'm telling you right now, they'll cover it up until, well, I think they stopped covering it today. Melania Trump decided she was going to do a prenup, and then the news was all consumed with that today. So our media is so quick for clicks that they're not so interested in staying with the substantive. So that's my spiel on that. I'm glad that Rachel Biddicker changed her mind, but I'm happier to see that at least some of the media right now is recognizing that Kamala Harris is going to, I'm knocking on wood, is probably going to be the VP. I'm still knocking on wood. I was going to be the VP pick, I'm hoping. Okay, knock on wood. Okay.
You know why they're changing their narrative. Child, the KHive is all on their asses. Child. Let's just be honest. It is us that's changing that narrative because they don't want to get drugged on the internet just cause.
But with logic. We're doing it with logic and receipts. You know, that's what.
Now we don't attack people for no reason. We're not toxic. Oh my
God. We don't lie either.
Absolutely not. We do not attack unwarranted. Lord Jesus, if you mess with us, we mess with you. You mess with Congo, we on you. Don't play with us.
And before we shoot back, is anyway. Go ahead.
No, Maya, I was just going to ask, how do you feel about the latest polls that have come out with Kamala as number one and the polling across the Democrats?
Oh, I mean, I feel fantastic about it. And to me, Joe's team would be absolutely foolish to go anywhere else. And it was interesting to see that top 6 list today, where it was all Black women, one Latina woman, and then Warren, and then go, okay, so Joe knows he's in a pickle, right? So he's like, so I'm going to ignore all these women and then like pick Warren. I mean, he knows, I'm assuming he knows he can't do that. And one of the things is because we know real people in real life. We don't just exist in Twitter. We have families that live in the South. We have families that live over here. We've talked to them. They would, no one I know, except for these couple of professors that we see online that would say, I think it would be great to have Elizabeth and Joe. It doesn't make any logical sense anywhere else in the rest of the United States. People who are conservative, people who are moderates, who exist, people who are this, they're voting, and they're probably going to vote for Biden. If you put someone like Warren on, or you have people that all of a sudden have hesitations to have, and I'm not an ageist, but to have a 70-year-old plus ticket is a tough, all white ticket is a tough sell. So I'm thrilled to pieces that the rest of the United States sees that Kamala Harris, who raised the most money for fundraising for Joe, is the person to be VP. So yes, to answer your question, Heather, thrilled to see the numbers. Thrilled.
Yes, Kamala, get you a coin. But speaking of
yeah,
coin,
I guess I should jump in because Maya just kind of kicked it to me. But yeah, I mean, hey, we've been saying for I don't know how long. It feels like it's been ages at the rate that things move. But that Kamala is the choice. And I mean, this week alone, she gave Joe Biden another 3.5 million reasons why. So look, when we're talking about Kamala Harris, we all knew that she was already a fundraising powerhouse for Democrats, not only for herself, but particularly down the ballot and on issues that matter to us. Every single time that there's an issue, every single time that she's grilling somebody like a Kavanaugh, she's also fundraising for a lot of these organizations. So we all know this. And I think that this week, I think it was powerful to see that she outraised Hillary. She outraised pretty much everybody else that has done fundraisers except for Tom Steyer. And we already know Tom Steyer, he might have written a $4 million check himself. I'm just saying. But look, if we want to talk about conspiracies, but no. Yeah, I just think that this week she just kind of showed another reason on top of all of the other reasons as to why Joe Biden needs to pick Kamala Harris as his VP. Period. That's it.
Reese?
Yeah, sorry, we're dealing with a troll in the comments, and so he's trying to terrorize the chat. But I think we got him taken care of. You know, unfortunately, Periscope has this really weird commenting thing. So I apologize to all of you who's had to deal with his crap, but I blocked his ass. So I don't know how it works. If once you're in there, you get to kind of stay in there and continue talking shit. So, but I was listening. I promise you, I was listening.
Lose your job.
Get the stairs. Hey,
Reese, we could
I'm just
drug it in live. We live right now. We could have drug. You could have read the comments. We could have jumped on it behind live.
Nah, it's cool. You don't really give the trolls air time. I think I successfully blocked his ass though. But I think a lot of it has already been said, so I don't want to belabor any points that have already been made. The one thing I do want to say though is I do think it's interesting how we've been beat over the head with the polls. You know, matter of fact, you know, this is what always trips me out is when people who aren't Black put a poll in front of me about what Black people think to try to tell me, will you prove to me? I told somebody yesterday, I don't have to prove shit to you. I'm Black. So I already know. You can pull whatever poll in front of you. I understand that the polls represent name recognition. I understand that if you run a $140 million campaign,
Right.
with 1,000 mentions a week, and you don't get the social media attacks like Kamala Harris, who in one post debate period had 181,795 attacks out of 200,000. When you don't get that kind of heat on your ass, then yeah, you might have 5 or 6 points on Kamala Harris in terms of favorability. Now your unfavorables ain't really hitting on too much better than Kamala's. Hello. And you have almost near universal name recognition. So, there's that. But I also understand that what Black people appreciate is they appreciate seeing you. And this is one of the things I always say, Kamala, go talk to Black media because Black people see you. And when you have the cultural competency that Kamala has, you can go into our spaces and people like what they see when they do see Kamala. Kamala's doing the work. So, I'm sorry, I said I was listening, but I was only half listening. So, the poll the story came out today about, Joe Biden having his top 6 or whatever. Okay, that's fine. But I think, my charge to the Live with the KHive crew that you over here, that means that you ride or die. We have to make sure we push back. Y'all saw I had to go ahead and bite Mehdi's head off. I don't know if he's going to respond. It might not have been a good idea to go after a motherfucker who got 849,000 followers, but guess what? I stayed right there and got to get rid of it. I ain't never scared. So if he want to buck back and if he want to stick his followers on me, they can all get cussed out too. But my whole point is that we have to stay on high alert because it's going to get uglier. We've already been through the fire with the campaign. Like I said, 1 week, 181,795 attacks on Kamala out of 200. So we already know what's going to pop off, but this is going to be crunch time. This is not the time to retreat. This is not the time to say, okay, her favorables are up. She's leading in terms of the options with the first choice in terms of Black voters, in terms of Latino voters. She's leading on that. She has the momentum working her way. So this is where we have to absolutely make sure we keep our foot on the gas. We push back. They're going to cry. Oh my God, you guys are a cult. Well, you're a cult of lies and disinformation. And when you're a cult of lies and disinformation, then guess what? You are inviting the hive and we're going to sting your ass. It's just that simple. So we're going to have to learn how to put the fear of God in these people, because here's the thing. It's not necessarily that they individually change votes. What happens is people like Nate Cohen from the New York Times or people like Rachel Bitterkofer, without any outside evidence, with just based on the 3 or 4 people that they follow, that they have dubbed some sort of tastemakers, they take those people talking mess and say, oh, Kamala has problems. Kamala doesn't have problems. Where's your data? I want to see some receipts. I want to see some facts. Just because that person who is invested in pushing their candidate has the issue, of course they would. Then they still get to set the narratives. And so then when Nate Cohn writes a trash ass thread that's not fact-based, when Rachel Bitterkofer writes a trash ass thread that's not fact-based, then that makes it into the New York Times. And then the New York Times is what sets the narrative. And then that's what seeps into the consciousness of the electorate. And so that's why we have to keep our foot on the gas and make sure that we push back very heavily on them, and so that they understand that no, you're not going to be able to write that on New York Times article. You're not going to be able to write that Washington Post article and make these assertions without getting heavy pushback. Maybe that article comes out one time, but then they know the next time that we're going to be on their ass. So I don't mean to cuss too much on Live with the KHive, but all I'm saying is, look, this is go time. Kamala's doing what she got to do. She out there, she got bills, she's leading the charge, she's everywhere. I don't know when she sleeps, but we have a charge on our own self to do the work. You guys are asking about misinformation, all sorts of kind of stuff. Listen, y'all got my Twitter. I posted today, mega thread. If you go to mega thread and from Black Women Views, you will get an abundance of information. I have every kind of receipt under the book. And matter of fact, today I actually beefed up the disinformation line on a thread. You got to click through, y'all. Come on, work with it. Click through a couple of clicks to get to the information that you got to get through, but it should be relatively straightforward to follow. And you go on ahead and you get your receipts. If you don't have the receipts, come talk to me. I will give you the receipts that you need. But this is not the time to let up, because they know this is their last ditch effort. They don't have 6 weeks. They got 2 weeks.
They sure ain't got
shit. They got 2 weeks. So we got 2 weeks to make sure we are on their head. If they crying, that means we're doing something right. If they complaining, that means we're doing something right. Because first of all, they shouldn't have Kamala name in their mouth in the first place. So let's go ahead and make sure we have to make it very uncomfortable. I'm not saying dox people. I'm not saying threaten people. I'm not saying wish none on nobody now, child. Come on. Don't say that we doing that. Don't do that. That's not what we saying over here. But what I'm saying is go ahead with them receipts and let them know. Don't be lying on Kamala. Don't come for her unless you want to stand for us. That's all I'm saying.
And another thing, didn't that poll say that her name recognition, Reese, you touched on this, but didn't her name recognition go up like 30% or something? Wasn't it like some crazy number in there?
I don't know the percentage, but I remember that there is that her name recognition.
It was a substantial jump because of her leadership right now. So that just speaks to the fact that in the primary, a lot of people did not know who Senator Kamala Harris was. And after, you know what I mean, the first likely debate, they kind of tuned a lot of it out, which was what a lot of us were saying, is that people had no idea, not only in terms of like the policy, but her background, who she was, any of that. And that's because there were so many candidates. And so when you're looking at, you know what I mean, the attacks, like Reese points to these numbers all the time. Reese, what were the numbers? The amount of attacks?
181,000 out of 795 attacks. And that's just, and the 200,000 is all of the attacks for all of the candidates. People was attacking her. She got 92% of the attacks of all of the candidates. How does that make sense? That's why we have, and this is no shade to Joe, because hey, it is what it is. Good for him. That for whatever reason, they didn't think that he was going to be the nominee, so they was on Kamala's head. But how do you attack Kamala and she get 91% of the attacks, and you have Joe Biden in first place with 30% of the vote? That didn't make any sense, but that was the strategy, and we saw that continue on. And then when she got out, then it became, okay, let's make sure she's not VP. So then we've seen it pick back up again. But there is quantifiable data. This is not conspiracy theories. There's quantifiable data, and it's not KHive people that have come up with this data. We just know that the data is out there, and we've cited the data, and the data refutes what they're saying, whether it's about the number of attacks. They say, oh, everybody was attacked. Not true. Not everybody got 92% of the attacks in this particular incident. Over 60% of the attacks over the course of the campaign. Not everybody had that. Let's be clear. And then when they talk about, oh, well, she has these problems, she has those problems, where is that showing up in her favorables? Because I don't see that number in her favorables. Her favorables are on par. And unfavorables, let's talk about the unfavorables, because she has all these problems. Why are her unfavorables on par with Elizabeth Warren's if she's so unfavorable? There's all these issues. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how Kamala Harris is the first choice in the latest poll. And I don't live by the poll. I don't like to die by the poll. But of Democrats, not Republicans, Democrats, Kamala Harris is the first choice above Elizabeth Warren. So you would like to see these aggregate numbers, and when we break it all down, it tells you a different story. And to Heather's point, her name recognition, she still has 20 points of I've never heard of. She does not have universal name recognition. And yes, she is really, really close to Elizabeth Warren in terms of her favorables, and she's exactly the same practically in terms of her unfavorables.
Period. But let me say one thing, since y'all are bringing this up. I think a lot of people they're thinking, for some odd reason, there's this situation that's going on. And it's coming from a particular group of people, can't say who. But when it comes to Kamala Harris just doing her job, for some odd reason, they believe that she is auditioning to be VP when she's just doing her job. It's not our fault that your fave is not doing their job. It is not our fault.
Or that they don't have a job.
Putting up policy. It's not our fault that your job does not have, your fave does not have the cultural competency to talk about what we're going through right now. It's not our fault.
Or show up.
Lackluster and so Mayo and Miracle Whip. It's not our fault that Kamala Harris is literally the hot ticket item right now. It's not our fault that she's raising more money than everybody else. It's not our fault that we saw something in Kamala Harris before it was popular to see something in Kamala Harris. It's not our fault, and it's not Kamala's fault. Kamala's just doing her job. So if you mad, stay mad. If you salty, stay salty. Lord God, I don't want no iodine in my diet. Lord God, have mercy, Jesus. But at the end of the day, my blood pressure isn't high because I'm not salty, because I'm sitting so well and on the KHive. You should jump on the team Okay, because we win.
And people are jumping on the team chair. They're starting to jump on. And it's okay. We welcome you. We
The
ain't gonna
ultimate grifter. The ultimate grifter.
Welcome, Drift
Yeah.
on over.
I'm gonna save that for unfiltered. Look, y'all come to
we're
unfiltered.
gonna go to the unfiltered. But
Hey.
we ain't mad at you, Chair. If you want to go ahead and jump on a winning team, now is the time. It's a very, very fun spirited group. If you want to go ahead and join the KHive, Chair. You might as well. You might as well, because whatever happens this election cycle, and we are here because we do believe that Kamala Harris is the person to be VP. But guess what? She's still young and she's still fly. Unlike some of y'all faves, this ain't her last rodeo. And that's just a fact. I'm just saying, hello, do the math. Join the winning team, because at the end of the day, she's still a senator. She's still doing her thing. She's still young, black, and excellent. Okay. So go ahead and give her props. You ain't gotta always be down on Kamala, child, because if y'all really wanted us to, we could really be down on other people, but we ain't have to go there. We all about uplifting Kamala. So go ahead and join the winning team, and you will seem like you're smart. You seem like you have some foresight to go ahead and get with the winning team before everybody. Because once, I'm telling you right now, everybody got all the smoke right now because they feel like this is our last shot to take Kamala down. But I'm telling you, the energy is gonna shift. The energy, if she's selected, which we believe that she has an excellent chance of doing, watch how quick the energy shifts. And you can say, I was there, I was with you shooting in the gym. Go ahead and get them shots off before everybody else there, because it's gonna be crowded. You want to still be on the court. You don't want to be in the bleachers and the nosebleeds with all the other people that, oh yeah, we love Kamala. We see you, but we will.
They want some seasoning on their food. They want to know about flavor. They need some help. So
exactly.
Y'all go ahead and come over to KHive. We got you.
I know y'all been cooking with Kamala, and if you want all your Kamala gear, you need to go ahead and hit up Drew in the comments, because he's got all.
Everything.
Yeah.
Man, I got exclusive stuff, but now you already know KHive, man. Kamala's we are going to mirror Kamala Harris in the fact that we're gonna bring flavor. We're gonna bring flavor like we Khadijah James. The single joke. You don't get that.
And somebody, can I just say one more thing? Because somebody said it is the K in KHive for Karen. Let me tell you something. Don't do that. And I mean, I'm not all on the Karen tip, you know what I'm saying? Whatever. I had one tweet saying Karen and it was an issue. So I don't even do the Karen stuff. I ain't got time for it. I ain't got time to lose my account over the word Karen. But I will say though that don't erase Kamala's Black support. Don't do that. Don't do that, because there are plenty of us that understand the historic moment, that understand that she stands on the shoulders of Shirley Chisholm. Okay. Kara Mosley Brown, to a certain extent, but more so Shirley Chisholm. And we understand the gravity of this situation. And KHive Rashmi says, we Indian people have too much seasoning. Yes, because we're gonna go ahead and shout out her Desi side as well. Kamala, she's South Asian. She got the Indian flavor too. So she got a whole lot of stuff mixed up in there. So we're gonna represent for all those things, but don't sit up there and act like we do know somebody, I'm not gonna name the person, who their primary demographic is college educated white liberals. But in terms of Kamala's demographic, she has a very diverse demographic. But this show, Live with KHive, is all Black people. Okay. So don't sit up there and try to act like she's some sort of media manufactured thing, or don't try to sit up there and act like she doesn't have Black support, because we Black and we've been riding with her from the get-go.
Right. 100.
Damn right.
And that's it. Another episode of Live with the KHive. All that need to be said have been said. I'm your host, Drew Comments. You be chilling with Kenny, formerly King of Clapbacks. Now it's Fixed as Jesus, 93. You already know what's going on. Reese Blackman, Views, Maya Contreras, Heather Rose Goes, and the Sydney A. Sydney. And we out.
So we're gonna close this out. Come right back for the after show with people on Live with KHive, but not actually the episode of Live with KHive, because we got more to talk about. We're gonna probably do 30 minutes of interactive Live with the KHive. No, not Live with the KHive. Live with people from the show. Okay. So come right on back. We're gonna stop this stream. Come right back. So keep an eye out, refresh, give us 2 minutes.
Everything, please join back in. It's everything, y'all.
Yeah, join back in, give us 2 minutes to refresh it, because like I said, I got to change the title so that don't nobody want, this is Live with the KHive. We ain't got time for that. We're gonna go ahead and be unfiltered for y'all. So come back in 2 minutes.
I'm gonna call it the post up.